You know what, this place out in Cucamonga? And he goes, oh yes, the Kapu Kai. We go, Kapu Kai, what's that?
It was a very nice place to go.
The Kapu Kai was really, in a way, a ruin.
I call myself an urban archaeologist, and you know that's what I do.
My name is Colin Sato, and my father Warren owned the Kapu Kai. I guess I started searching for more information about it because it was a forbidden topic in our family. I typed Kapu Kai into Google, and up popped Tiki Central with all these people talking about our old bowling alley. And as I started digging around, I started finding information like, well, I found out about oceanic arts.
I'm Bob Van Oosting, and this is, you know, our company is called Oceanic Arts. We've been in business 53 years, supplying tropical decor for hotels and restaurants pretty much around the world.
I'm Leroy Schmaltz, and I'm the other half, and I predominantly do more of the construction and the artwork and so forth here, and Bob is the man in the office, and together we worked as a team.
Then what we did is we decided we need to go to the South Seas. So we took and mortgaged my Corvette we had at the time, and Leroy and I took off for the South Seas for 3.5 months for 37,000 miles. And we actually, when we left New Zealand on the way back home again, you know, well, we end up coming home with $1.50, not even enough for a cool drink. We were known to supply tropical decor and make custom lighting fixtures, and so this is it. The Craftsman Construction Company got a hold of us and asked what we could do, and so we end up supplying all the decor for both the bowling alley, the what is it called, the fire room or something like that, and then, you know, the coffee shop, so forth. And then there's two brothers who actually did the installation of the decor, but we had supplied all the decor and worked with them very closely for the entire time, you know, probably about 3 months.
My name is Salome Sato, and I was married to Warren Sato, and he bought the bowling alley called Kapu Kai.
My name's Joseph Filippi, and I'm a fourth generation operator of our family winery here in the Cucamonga Valley.
My name is Linda Frost. I've lived in this area all my life, and I lived in the Cucamonga area for 30 years.
In all through the 60s, Cucamonga was it was pretty much all agricultural. It was very, very little industry here.
Cucamonga in the 60s was primarily country to me. It was a long drive. It took almost an hour because the freeway wasn't built then, so we went on Foothill Boulevard.
The Kapu Kai was a very good restaurant and attached to the bowling alley, and it was a place where we would go for a Polynesian meal.
It was one of the places to go, sure. And then I remember going to the Kapu Kai a couple times. We would have dinner. I forget the name of the special room they had for dining.
Fire room?
Something like that.
The entry doors was about like 4 inches thick. It was quite thick. And they had a waterfall and a little bridge that into the entrance.
As children, we didn't visit the Kapu Kai often. If we had relatives in town or if there was a special occasion, Mom would pack us in the car and we'd make that 50-mile drive out from La Crescenta to Cucamonga. I'd say my childhood was normal. I mean, when you look back on it, does anybody really know if their childhood is normal or not? But, you know, my father would go off to work and he would come home long after we were asleep, and we'd see him on weekends when we had family outings and things like that.
I remember it well because it had been raining for 11 or 12 days straight.
And I remember the sheets of rain on the freeway, the flooding, Foothill Boulevard.
And back then that channel there I believe it's Cucamonga Creek. It wasn't concrete, it was just two embankments awash. And lots of water, lots of water.
Having grown up in the area, I knew that you don't use some streets during rainy weather because the original streets were designed, the north-south streets in the area were designed they were the flood control.
I remember I was in the back doing something, putting boxes away, and I heard this noise, kind of like a boom, like something hitting the wall. And I walked out front, and there was 2 or 3 feet of water rushing through the sales area. And my mom was getting kind of washed out the front door by a wine barrel.
I'll never forget the sound of boulders tumbling downhill, and you could hear them for a mile away, just tumbling down, and huge boulders.
Everybody says, we gotta go, come on. So someone grabbed the cash registers, and on the way out, I remember my grandpa, it was real cold, and he grabbed a bottle of vermouth. And I said, someone said, what are you doing, Joe? And he said, well, it's cold out. So he grabbed that bottle, and we went out on Foothill, not much you could do, and just watched the place get flooded.
It was deep enough to swallow up a car, and not only the depth of the water, but the speed at which it was rushing downhill.
And it just kept going, and it didn't fan out and stop probably down till Arrow Highway is where it pretty much had calmed down. And there was some homes down there too, they got flooded. Barrels of wine got flooded down there, down that far.
We got a phone call. I first heard about the flood when we got a phone call in the middle of the night telling us that the river, the Cucamonga Creek, had overflowed and that the bowling alley was in danger.
I remember driving by and looking at the Kapu Kai and the bowling alley, which were taken out.
You could hardly drive on the road. Mud, rocks all over. The whole area was just like, I've never seen anything like it. It's just, oh my God, unbelievable. It was devastating. When we went inside, the damage that we saw, first thing I saw was the big 4-inch doors that were ripped off its hinges. And then the overstuffed furniture that was in the bowling area, and they were ripped off their moorings, their foundation. And then the same with the dining room, all the chairs, everything was just torn like a big hurricane, a big flood. The bowling alley itself was under mud. There was nothing you could see of the bowling alley, none of the returns or there were some pins floating around, but you couldn't go in because the water was still there. I mean, it was mud, but there was a layer of water. There was nothing to see. You couldn't see anything. It was dark, for one thing, because there was no electricity.
I think when that happened after the flood, I don't think anybody was in that bowling alley in the Kapu Kai. In fact, I think they actually shut it, closed it, and they wouldn't allow anybody in there.
The winery, the Thomas Winery, I remember a huge gaping hole in that where the boulders had crashed through the structure.
We started, the only thing to do, the first thing we did was, I remember, prop up the walls the best we could where the walls were busted out and the roof was sagging. And then family decided, well, we're just going to clean it up.
And you can see the natural waterways, the natural runoff spots, and that's what happens. A creek will, if diverted, will go back to whatever its normal flow was.
Because see, they changed the direction. Years ago, they changed the direction of the way the stream naturally flowed. Well, when this water got on top, it didn't care. It just went right over and came right through the Kapu Kai and came through Thomas Winery.
So it was something on a magnitude of natural disaster that I'd never before seen. But it was one of those benchmark events that you know where you were when it happened, and you'll never forget it, and I will never forget it.
So we ended up losing our house because it was the collateral for the bowling alley. We lost our everything that we had. It wiped us out, financially, emotionally, physically.
You know, the interesting thing is that while our family was doing its best to put this tragedy behind us, the Kapu Kai was being remembered by more people than I could ever have imagined.
My name is John English.
My name is Bosco Hernjack.
My name is Jeff Beachbum Barry.
My name is Sven Kirsten. I'm a cinematographer living in Los Angeles.
I'm an architectural historian.
I'm known either as a freeloading rummy or as a cocktail historian, depending on whom you ask and who I owe money to.
My interest in Tiki, I think, is related to my visual senses. You know, I'm a cinematographer by profession, so I'm a very visually oriented person, and I just relate to interesting images when I see them. And when I came upon these images of these carved tikis and in 1950s normal-looking Americans posing with these strange idols, it just sort of fascinated me.
I think if anyone's responsible for any tiki urban archaeology done in Los Angeles, it's Sven Kirsten.
My research, which I call urban archaeology, is purely a passion.
Urban archaeology suggests the practice of digging through and exploring the built environment, cities, towns, suburbia.
But Bosco Hernjack, a tiki mug maker and sculptor, was independently, without knowing Sven, without having met him or me, cruising around Pomona and Cucamonga and San Diego counties looking for examples of tiki architecture and finding them and documenting them as well.
But Sven had put together a more comprehensive history of who started it, how it began to devolve. And even then, this was early on in his research. But when we met him, it was just like, wow, you know, there's somebody else that's into this, and he knows so much about it.
And I realized I knew more than anybody else because I had been, you know, doing it for a couple of years by then. And that, you know, maybe I should be the one to do a book about it.
All of us were just sort of finding our footing with this whole lost tiki world, this vanished Polynesian pop cultural fad. And we were sort of falling into niches. Bosco fell into the niche of making mugs and wall sculptures.
I began carving tikis. It was in the early 90s. It was, we're here in the Kapu Tiki room, and I wanted to make a tiki bar for all my mugs here. But I also wanted to have tikis in here, and I couldn't know, back then nobody carved them. And so, what can you do? And so on the way here, you pass the places that all have new houses now. Somebody had dumped a whole bunch of logs, and I kept driving by them thinking to myself, you know, I bet I could carve one of those things, because I am a sculptor, but I'd never done wood carving. And I kept passing them, and it's between my parents' house and here, and I kept thinking, oh, you know, I'm gonna pull over. And I did one day, threw them in the trunk, and did some very badly executed carvings.
Sven fell under the, well, Sven was sort of Big Daddy. He just sort of fell under the whole thing of just documenting everything and putting it out there.
The title of my first book is The Book of Tiki, and it's sort of a play on the Book of the Dead, of course. And it was the first book to pull all the elements of this mid-century phenomenon together, and in such a way that it can be defined as a style, as an art or architecture style.
The thing that I ended up sort of branching off and specializing in was the drinks, which, as I found over the years, were an enormous part of the economic engine that drove the whole Polynesian pop fad. For example, even a tiki bowling alley was expected to serve tiki drinks. The latest book I've written is called Beach Bumberry Remixed, and it is a compilation of my first two books, which were The Grog Log and Intoxica.
How I heard about the Kapu Kai, I heard about it after I had discovered it many years later when I met Sven Kirsten. My friend Mark and we would go driving around Los Angeles when I was going to art school, and we just ended up stumbling upon it. We were driving down Route 66, which we didn't even know that was Route 66 at the time, but we came upon it and it was empty at that point. It was sometime in the mid to late 80s. It had been closed for quite a while.
I first heard about the Kapu Kai bowling lanes when I went over to my friend Chris Nichols' house. Chris Nichols is an architectural historian, and along with his and my friends John English and Pete Maruzzi, they spend a lot of time going around the Los Angeles County area seeking out historic buildings.
I decided around 1992 to really seriously get into researching and documenting the remnants of American tiki culture. And we went on these expeditions to places like the Tikis amusement park that had been closed and forgotten. And one of our expeditions also led us to the Kapu Kai in the Rancho Cucamonga.
I think it was Sven Kirsten who first brought it to my attention. He wanted to go out there. We knew that the bowling alley was closed.
I always remembered that expedition to the Kapu Kai because it was one of the first times that more than one or two people got together to go looking at a place and investigating it.
If I remember correctly, I don't think we really had official permission to get into the Kapu Kai ruins, as I would call it.
The plywood was already kind of open in one place, a little bit loose, and so we were able to gain entry to the building.
We broke into the building. It was boarded up, and one of us, I forget who, actually, I mean, we're all just a bunch of nerds. We're all just a bunch of architecture geeks, tiki geeks. We're not armed robbers. We don't know anything about breaking and entering, but the lure of the place was so strong.
As we had expected, it was completely dark inside. There was no electricity, there was no lights, and we fortunately brought along a flashlight or two, and so we walked into the building.
And it was a huge space. We didn't expect to find anything left.
And passed the flashlight through the darkness, and at some point we finally, the light landed on these beautiful tiki columns, carved tiki columns, and it was one of the most unusual but exhilarating experiences.
They must have been 10 to 15 feet tall, hand-carved tiki posts, which were load-bearing posts, I believe. They were like holding up the ceiling.
I think the only tikis we found inside were the main structural big poles that were in the bowling alley itself, because they were structural, so they couldn't be taken away.
It isn't the kind of thing that myself and the rest of us that day would normally do. We didn't really think of this as breaking and entering, because of course we were on a mission.
And it was really sad to see it, boarded up and with dried up plants and dried up moats with no waterfalls flowing and stuff like that.
I personally never went back to the Kapu Kai after that day. I felt as though we had seen what we could see, and if we couldn't salvage anymore, I was interested in following the fate of the building and the property. But it wasn't long before it really was demolished.
I saw all the people inquiring about Kapu Kai specifically, and about Tiki artifacts, and the interest that was being generated. That really surprised me.
I'm still collecting Tiki material where I can, and Tikis. I just got this great, this guy over there from this gentleman at the Maikai in Florida, and yeah, I'm not as fervent anymore as I used to be, because if you look around my house, there's just no room anymore.
I believe that Bosco, independently of all of us, went there and scoped it out and actually found some stuff that was like thrown into a dumpster.
That was a friend of mine actually got it. He lives in Cucamonga now. And so he wrote me a mail saying, I have a really big tiki, you wouldn't be interested in trading for it or something like that, for some smaller tikis. And I don't know why, but I said it wouldn't happen to be from the Kapu Kai in Cucamonga, and it just freaked him out. But we did a trade, and it came here, and then about 2002 or so, I'd wanted to build a container for it. That's the hut that you see out there. And I built that to hold the tiki.
During the course of our research, I corresponded with an awful lot of people. And in one of the emails, Bosco mentions that he got married under the Kapu Kai Tiki, and Beach Bumbari performed the service.
Well, we wanted to get married, and it was obviously not a traditional marriage kind of a thing, so we needed a special priest, you might say. So we asked Jeff to do it, and Beach Bumbari, and he said okay. So we got him his minister's license, and he did marry us up there, and it was very nice. It was right under the tiki and everything. And then about, 3-4 years later, Sven said, oh, I found a picture of, I don't remember how it even came up. He said, I found a picture of your tiki at the Kapu Kai. And I said, oh, really? And so he gave me the picture, and it was a picture of, while they were exploring it, Jeff was standing next to the same tiki he married us under. It was just like, whoa. It was, it was kind of cool, but yeah, it was very nice.
In general, I'm very happy that there's a revived interest in this period of American culture, pop culture, and that places like the Kapu Kai are being researched and will last in people's memory, and that now even the families that were involved in tiki temples like this come forth and help with that, because I think it was a very unique period, and it deserves to be recorded and perpetuated.
I remember the Kapu Kai as being a fancy place, something very different.
There was a sense of style and no expense spared to make these special places where you can completely forget about your normal day-to-day existence.
It was unique, and when it washed out, we really, really missed it.
That was really magical in an environment that you wouldn't forget, and so it's very significant. The Kapu Kai is very significant.
I came into it sort of not knowing what it was, like I did with many of these places. All I knew was maybe by a matchbook or something, but there I had actually been there and looked inside. It was just a mystery to me for so many years. Then when I met Sven and he confirmed that it was something, and then I ended up with the Tiki. I don't know, it's a very odd thing that there's something you had no relation to, suddenly you have a whole history with it. You know, it's a very, I don't know how to describe it. It's a very odd thing.
Serendipity.
Yes, in a way, yeah. It's nice, you know. And then here you are here. It's just like it's this full circle that it's come, you know. And
when Bosco said that things had come a full circle, it really resonated with me. I was just a child when we had the bowling alley, so I mostly know it from pictures. And when I look into the eyes of this Tiki, I can only imagine the things that he's seen. And we start working on this project, and I get to go up there and see and touch this Tiki, and it really made it real for me.